So hey, Mark Warnke here, PackGoats.com. They call me the goat guy. I'm going to go through the ranch update. We always break this up in multiple segments. We want to show you what we have here. If you want to learn how we homestead, we have a course that we're developing where I pulled in a ton of different experts, really cutting edge people, long format interviews, teaching courses on all the different disciplines of homesteading, off-grid, soil, permaculture, chickens, goats, hunting, lifestyle. And that's the other thing that we blend into it, is that we acknowledge the human being in the homestead in becoming a well-rounded human being. So physical, spiritual, and mental well-being as well. And I speak on those different topics. And so it's really a beautiful look at owning land and then how you contribute back to the world and to your community and build a community around yourself. And if you're a next level homesteader, you would really enjoy that. I'm going to be talking today about kind of the ranch updates. I do these about 4 or 5 times a year. They're fairly long format. We break them up in chapters. But I'm going to talk about our new seeding. I'm going to talk about our pasture rotation, talk about our milking program, our does, our chickens, and what we're doing with them this year to control Mormon crickets, and how we, are thankful for the ravens that come on our property and build a nest every year and protect our chickens. And then we've done some other infrastructure stuff. We've developed an Airbnb here on the property. It's almost done. I hesitate to show you because it's so close to being done. I'd rather show you when it's done, but I'm going to let you have a peek at it. And then we'll just dive in and kind of put your seatbelt on. I hope you enjoy it. We have made some changes to the pens because now we're free ranging everything. So the wethers are grazing the mountains, and we have 3 pastures. We have the mountain pasture, we have what we call the creek pasture, which includes the high pasture, and then we have what we call the highway pasture, and then we're watering, and we've planted a field now. So we're gonna talk about kind of that stuff. So let's transfer over there, and then I'll break down kind of what we're doing in terms of our feeding program on using our 44 acres here with our bottom 8 that we can water, and what we're doing to try to overcome that. So take a little break. I'll get into a new place on the ranch, and then we'll talk about that. All right, so we're down here in the wether pen, and these are all my big packers. If you'll come around, you can kind of see them. This is the crew that will be running. There are some 2-year-olds in here, and I'll be putting them on the trail. Wolf, Scout, and Preacher, and then my adult crew, who I've honed down. And we lost Merciless and Thorn. For those of you guys that don't know, they got old, and what happens with goats is their teeth begin to wear down enough, or they lose enough where they can't chew their cud anymore. And we fed them an intentional diet all winter because they're just such amazing goats. But that intentional diet of chaff, hay, and grain cost me like $1,500 during the winter. And I'm in the ranching business, and we had to make the call that they were struggling enough, and that we would have to offset more feed. And in this economy, we just didn't have the luxury to continue to do that. So it was time to put them down, and I did that. And let me speak to that real quick. That ended up being a very beautiful experience for me, and I can't say for them necessarily, but at the same time, I had a quiet moment with them. It was very sweet, each one of them, and I buried them together because they were really good buddies. And both of them were emaciated and skinny enough to where I didn't butcher them, and which in some ways I'm disappointed about, and in other ways I'm glad I got to kind of put them in whole. It's kind of opposed to the way that I think about that, but once again, the offset of how skinny they were, and that sort of thing, and so I just buried them. But at the same time, that's part of life, is if there's an end to all of it, and I can tell you that it was a really beautiful experience. The other thing I want to mention about that is that I had lots of times when I put down animals, I feel like a feeling of regret. I feel regretful about things that may have been about me, of me not doing my best for them. And I can tell you that as I get older and I become a better human being, it was really neat to check in with myself and feel no regret with them. I didn't feel regretful, I just felt grateful. And that was a really beautiful thing for me because, you know, sometimes there are times when I put down a dog or other animals or even goats where I felt regret that I hadn't been the most for them. And I didn't feel that with those guys, so I felt very blessed for that. So we're gonna walk these guys out. These are the big wethers. They're used to this. We walk them out every day and put them in their pasture. So she'll film a little bit of this and include it, but we're just mainly gonna get them out of here. Come on, boys, goats, good boys. Come on, come on, good boys. Goats, goats, hi goats. Hi goats. So this is what we call the creek pasture, and I know this has got kind of, you know, a higher feel to it up here, but if you come over or if you just look down this way, this creek bottom has two different creek drainages in it. It's over 100 yards wide and two creeks. So the bottom underneath it, they actually confluence and come together right there and then join and become one creek. This creek that's on the far side comes out of those mountains right there, and the other creek comes out of that big drainage that goes up this way and then that drainage. And so the main creek has a lot more water in it. The creek that comes from that side has less. But what it does is it creates a really high water table in our bottom, so that pasture stays super lush and green deep into the summer, plus all the trees and forage and everything else. This pasture, which we don't water currently, has a tendency to dry up shortly before that one, but there's always good grass in here. So but remember, goats aren't grazers, they're foragers, and so we utilize all three pastures. So we run our mountain pasture in the spring until it dries out and kind of becomes not as good a forage. Then we move them and we'll rotate them on and off the creek bottom, and then we graze the highway pasture because it's the driest, the most south facing, and we've already grazed that off. And so now we're rotating between these two pastures, and it's way more than they can utilize. And so we want to break it up eventually into multiple, like 6 or 7 pastures, so that we can graze it down more and do a better rotational schedule. It's just the fencing and everything that it takes to do that is quite extensive, and we're, you know, we haven't even been here quite 2 years yet, so which is amazing. So anyway, so we're running, I wanted you to get a look at this. I'm going to put them up on the mountain pasture. You're going to notice that when I try to push them through the fence, there's always those goats that come and hang at the gate and then be the billy goat gruff. Sorry, she's getting messed with. The billy goat gruff that won't let the others through, and you'll see how I handle that. Huh, goats? Huh, goats? Huh, goats? That's something to remember about goats, is that they will wait if somebody else is waiting, and so they'll follow the last person. So always my goats, my juveniles, will come through last because they're the ones that are scared to come through the gate and get whacked. On goats, on wolf. And so I can either move the herd further and they'll come, or I can come down and motivate them to come through. Here they come. Film down there, honey. On, wolf. On, goats. So now if I turn around and come back down, I always do it in an angle because they'll all run back through the gate again to get ahead of me. And so if I come down here and I got this one goat that's languishing behind, I'll just kind of motivate him. Come on, buddy. Go on. All right. So that's the process of putting them on the pasture. And you can see there's tons and tons of grass and forage up there. And the amazing part is throughout the day, they will go clear up to the top of the mountain and they'll just run back and forth. Now, those of you that know my fence configuration, this is what my fencing is throughout. And it's a little beat up here because this is where the elk come through as well. So I actually have an attachment point. I pull that off when the elk are moving through the property in the fall and the spring and the winter. And I'll just put this fence back up when we're grazing it. And then I taught the elk by doing that where to come through, and they learned it really quick and they stopped tearing my fence down. I have an opening here, and then I had an opening up there, and then an opening on the far side. And by creating openings, they use that instead of tearing the fence down. So they will graze up, but my pasture, those 5 posts up on the ridge top up there are my corner. But trying to get fencing up there was insane. This mountain is avalanche steep. So we have avalanches here. It's way steeper than the camera shows. And so we packed 100-pound packs of these coils up the mountain. And what we did is we fenced it there, dropped down there, and then we fenced it to that saddle. And then on the far side, which you can't see, we fenced up to the perimeter. Up to the top. So there's no fence at the top. And my hope was that the goats would be too lazy to go over the top of the mountain. And I've been right now for going on the 2nd summer. Now, as they get to know this pasture better, I'm wondering if they'll get more and more brave. But in their graze throughout the day, they just graze back and forth across the mountain and they never make it to the top. They make it close, but they don't make it to the top. And that saved me having to fence the very top, which would have been an absolute nightmare. I'm guessing that would probably be a 3-week chore, just getting coils up there. And putting all the posts in, because we don't have T-posts up there either, so we'd be hiking T-posts up there. So my hope was that we would get by with this, and the great news is we did. And the other thing these goats are doing is helping us with fire prevention, because these hillsides burn fairly regularly, and now we have a barrier of less prolific growth closest to our property, so we graze this down heavy until it's really grazed. And then we pull the goats down into the lower pasture during the summer and the fall, where we can both put water on in the future, but it also stays nice and wet, and we have the ability to forage all our goats. Now, one last note is that this year's the first year we're deciding to keep our doe herd separate from our wether herd even during the summer. So we're going to be running them separately, which then puts extra pressure on pastures where we can't let them rest, which then is going to make us even be more vehement in our effort to make smaller pastures so we can graze one and do better pasture rotation. And I'm going to show you the new field I planted with goat forage. That's the future of the ranch now that we have access to water and irrigation systems and all that other stuff, which also costs a lot of money. And so we've been trying to scale that process. So we'll go back down to the new planting and I'll show you that. Hey, buddy. So a little bit of a future project here. That's how much hay we had left over and last year from last year. And we scaled up our does and we're holding more goats now. And then we have the 3 horses, but we had a big stack of hay here for the horses. And then we filled the entire barn with hay. So we don't have enough hay barn to keep our hay dry. And so the plan is to potentially add 1 more section and be able to put 2 more retriever loads in the barn. and it's not a super tough project. It's just, you know, us adding on to the existing barn, and I believe we're going to do that. And the other thing, Shea, if you can zoom in there, you can actually see the baby ravens with their mouths open right now up at the top of the nest. I don't know if you can see him or not, but there's one with his mouth open. Yeah, he's right there at the top, his little mouth open. So anyway, those ravens are such a gift to us because they keep the birds of prey out of here. One bird of prey comes through here, they run them off, and we've never lost a chicken to a bird of prey that we know of. So that's been super nice to have them. They're a real blessing. And last year, all their babies died, and I think it was avian flu. All 4 babies were dead, and the ravens just left the nest. I thought it was either heat or avian flu because it gets hot up there. But this year they seem to be thriving, doing really well, and I can see they're getting their black feathers on now. So it's going to be pretty cool. Last year she had 4 babies up there. I'm wondering how many come to maturity. So I'm pretty excited about the ravens. They have really good, you know, they're a super good bird to have. I hear that they can be hard on little baby chicks, but we keep all our chicks under cover and we don't have any problems with the other birds. So I'm a big fan of the raven, and I'm stoked that they're here. So this is our new planting. We're gonna go out there and I'll show you what we did there. So there's the mama. And by the way, what I see her feed them all the time is Mormon crickets and bugs. I see them hopping around on the hill and catching bugs and then bringing them down. So it's pretty cool to know what a raven feeds her babies. I don't think it's carrion very often. I think it's more bugs in the spring. So this is the new planting, and the horses, we have 3 horses because Trish is a horse lady and she just can't live without horses. But at the same time, they're going to be an addition to the ranch in our Airbnb that we're running, in having extra stuff. Go ahead and keep coming, Shea, so he doesn't bug you. We got, hey, back. We got absolutely dumped on last night. We had a big thunderstorm come in and we got dumped on, but this is the new planting. And the fun part about it is that it's intentional for goat forage. So there's actually 7 different species in here, and we have to let all this come to seed before we do it. But if you go deeper into the field, there's even, we planted things like turnips, and we planted, there's trefoil in here, there's crested wheatgrass, there's clover. So it's a very intentional food specifically for goats that is also baleable. And so we're going to be able to harvest it someday, and they'll naturally forage off of it. So our goal here is to be able to keep it wet. Hi, Stinky. How are you, buddy? And we're running these Cannon sprinklers, and we're running a gas pump down out of the creek. And this is how we're getting water on this. And you can see we have these other 2 fields here. It's our goal to plant those someday as well, but we had to kind of scale it. It's hard to get seeding to take here because our water doesn't last long enough to get it mature enough to where it doesn't get killed off in the perennial species during the summer. So you're usually better to do fall plantings. This field was already prepped because the horses do what horses do. They eat everything down to the dirt. So we didn't have a bunch of weeds. So we're going to have to handle the weed problem out here, which we're thinking of multiple different ways to do that. And then we'll plant in the fall, water, let it get seed, let it go dormant, and then come up in the spring, and then have our other 2 pastures planted. And that way we'll easily have 3 pastures here that we can rotate from, another pasture there, and then the mountain pasture, which gives us lots more variety and the ability to keep water on this stuff so that we'll have it nice and lush, clear into, you know, at least midsummer, if not more, and hopefully get 1 cutting off of it. So that's kind of the goal. So Here's our compost piles, which I try to put my compost piles close enough to where I can actually get water on them. Because if you can get water on compost, it does its business much, much faster, and it does the act of composting. So that's last year's compost. That's this year's compost out of the pens that we clean and out of the horses. And then this becomes really, really great fertilizer and to help build the soil here on the ranch. So this is another pasture that we have on the ranch, and this was the only watered pasture on the ranch when we came in. It's actually watered off of our well, so it's our domestic acreage that we can water off of our well, you know, in terms of the permitting. This we call the ice cream patch, and the reason we call it that, if you just put horses in here, they would just be big fat behemoths by the end of it. So you can only let them graze this pasture like for maybe 2 hours, or they'll just be giant and fat. And then there's lots of forage in here, so we let the does graze in through this. This time of year, the does are foraging in here, and they get fed a little bit every day just to keep their milk production up. So we're still feeding them some high calcium food to offset the lack of calcium in natural forage. And then you can see down there in the corner, we built the septic system, and the septic system had that's where the leach field was for it. And so all the ground was tore up, so we planted more goat forage in the bottom half of that as well. And so we've planted that, and that's coming along. And then you'll also notice that we put a pad. My mom comes and stays intermittently during the summer, and so we built her a pad where her camper can be, and then we hope to build like a shelter over the top of it, so it's got more of a feel of permanence when she's here. And you know, it's been a real blessing to get a chance to take care of and be with my mom as she's getting older. She's 76 now, and her husband's 83, and it's been such a blessing to interact with her on that level and really be there for her. So we have her close to the house, and they got a nice view, and everything's really set up super nice down there for them. So remember, one of the facets of permaculture is making water kind of like have a place to land and stay on your land and be conserved and saved. And so one of the things that we have here is we have a spring on the ranch, and I've told you about this, that the problem was last winter, before I did this winter it worked great. Last winter this spilled out over the road, and we had a big ice jam, and it went through the pins and was a big problem. So I just channeled it around so that instead of coming this way, it goes this way. And then the other thing is all this beautiful plants and greenery grew here. And so it's creating more of a natural, you know, way about it. And we could intentionally plant plants that we could feed off of or eat off of, but we're choosing this to just be a pretty space. And the nice part is now this spring that just literally spills out of the hill comes down. It comes into this wash here, goes that way, and then I've channeled it into our pond so that it kind of has time to be able to move through the land and help with our water table and keep our pasture more naturally green, so we have to water less. And we're going to be doing more and more of that here on the ranch as we develop and do that. So that's something that's been kind of fun to see the fruits of our labor with this little beautiful spring and all that fun stuff. So I hope you enjoyed the update on the weathers, and then how we're approaching the new crops that we're growing as forage for the goats. And you know, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you watch the next episode, because we're going to go into how we're using the chickens to control grasshoppers and our strategy with that, and then as well show you our Airbnb. I'm super excited to show you how that turned out. It turned out amazing. So make sure you click to subscribe, and that you share this with your friends. And don't forget, turn on your notifications so that you are able to see our latest videos when they come up. Really appreciate you watching. Very grateful. Take care.